The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a cathedral made of living crystal. Light from distant stars filtered through the transparent walls, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled delegates. 12 species sat in their designated sections, each one representing civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years before humanity had even discovered fire. High Chancellor of the Dominion rose from his elevated throne. His scales shimmered between deep purple and silver as he moved, a sign of his advanced age and high status among his people. 4 fingers on each hand clicked against the armrest as he prepared to speak. The chamber fell into absolute silence. "The matter before us today concerns the species known as humans," announced. His voice echoed through the hall, amplified by technology so advanced it seemed like magic. "They have been part of our galactic community for 300 years. In that time, they have spread to 12 colony worlds. They have integrated themselves into our trade networks. They have provided labor and services to many of our member species." He paused, letting his words sink in. "However, their rapid expansion concerns this council. Their population growth exceeds all projections. Their presence in critical industries has become noticeable. Therefore, after careful deliberation, this council has decided to act." Ambassador Daniel listened from the human delegation platform. It was a small platform, positioned at the lowest level of the chamber, barely above the floor. The placement was intentional. It was meant to remind humans of their place in the galactic order. Daniel was 53 years old. He had gray hair cut short and brown eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. He had served humanity for 30 years, first as a soldier, then as a diplomat. He had learned long ago to keep his face calm no matter what he felt inside. Right now, he felt a cold anger building in his chest, but his expression showed nothing. "Effective immediately," continued, "humanity shall be classified as a subordinate species under Galactic Statute 741. This means several things. First, all human military vessels will be decommissioned and handed over to Council control. Second, human colonies will fall under joint administration by neighboring species. Third, humans will provide labor and resources to member worlds as directed by this council." A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. The delegate and creature named clicked her mandibles in satisfaction. The representative, a being made of living stone, nodded its massive head. Even the normally neutral seemed pleased. Daniel stepped forward. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. "Chancellor," he said, his voice steady and calm, "I must inform you that Earth's government has not agreed to these terms. In fact, we were not consulted at all." Laughter filled the chamber. It came from all directions, a mixture of clicks, whistles, and sounds that humans had no name for. Leaned forward, her compound eyes glittering with amusement. "Agreement is not required, human," she said. "You seem to misunderstand your position. The Galactic Council commands over 400 billion sentients across 9,000 star systems. Your species numbers merely 8 billion, spread thin across a handful of worlds. You have no fleet capable of challenging us. You have no weapons that concern us. You have nothing." She spread her forearms wide. "You will comply with this decree, or you will be made to comply. The choice is yours, but the outcome is the same." Daniel nodded slowly, as if considering her words carefully. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small communication device. It was simple, almost primitive-looking compared to the technology around him. He said into the device, "Please inform Admiral Peters that Contingency Omega is now in effect." A young woman's voice came back immediately. "Understood, Ambassador, transmitting to all stations now." The laughter in the chamber died away. Leaned forward, his scales shifting to a darker shade that indicated concern among his species. "What is Contingency Omega?" he asked. Daniel looked up at the Chancellor. For the first time since entering the chamber, he allowed himself to smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "Chancellor," he said, "humanity has a saying, hope for the best but prepare for the worst. For 300 years we have hoped that this day would never come. We hoped that we could live peacefully among your species. We hoped that you would see us as equals or at least as partners." He spread his hands. "But we also prepared for the worst. We prepared for the day when someone would decide that humans were too useful to remain free. We prepared for the day when someone would try to make us slaves." Made a harsh clicking sound. "Slaves? We are not making you slaves. We are simply organizing galactic society in its proper order. Younger species serve older ones. This is how it has always been." "Perhaps," Daniel agreed. "But humanity has never been very good at following orders we did not agree to. We have a long history of rebellion against those who try to rule us without our consent." He turned slowly, looking at each delegation in turn. "You see us as weak because we have acted weak. You see us as inferior because we have acted inferior. For 300 years, we have smiled and nodded and fixed your machines and moved your cargo and let you believe whatever you wanted to believe about us." His voice hardened. "That ends today." Rose to his full height, which was impressive. They were tall, nearly 8 feet when standing straight. "Are you threatening this council, Ambassador?" "No, Chancellor. I am informing this council of a simple fact. You have made a terrible mistake. You have declared war on a species you do not understand, and now you will learn why that was unwise." He turned and walked toward the exit. His assistant, a young woman named Park, fell into step beside him. She was 28 with sharp eyes and quick hands. She had been chosen for this assignment because she was the best at what she did, which was making things happen very quickly. "The delegates are panicking," she murmured. "They are calling there." "Good," Daniel replied. "Let them. By the time their messages arrive, it will already be too late." Behind them, the chamber erupted into chaos. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries were suddenly shouting across the room, was demanding order, but no one was listening. Daniel walked out into the corridor and allowed himself one moment of genuine emotion. He was afraid, not for himself but for his species. What came next would change everything. There would be no going back. But there had never really been a choice. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would not serve. Humanity would not be made subordinate to anyone. Whatever came next, they would face it on their feet. 3 days passed after the council made its decree. In galactic terms, 3 days was nothing. Messages took weeks to travel between star systems. Fleets took months to mobilize. Wars were planned over years and fought over decades. But humans did not operate on galactic terms. On the morning of the 4th day, the first distress signals began arriving at Galactic Command. They came from everywhere at once, flooding the communication networks with urgent pleas for help. "This is Station 7, one message read. "Human cargo vessels have stopped all deliveries. Our food supplies will run out in 6 days. Request immediate assistance." "This is Mining Colony 12. Human engineers have abandoned their posts. Our refineries have shut down. We cannot restart them without their expertise. Please advise." "This is Medical Center 4. Human pharmaceutical shipments have ceased. We are running low on critical medications. Thousands will die if supplies are not restored." High Chancellor stood in the command center of the council station, watching the reports scroll across dozens of screens. His scales had turned pale gray, a sign of deep distress among them. Around him, officials from a dozen species rushed back and forth, trying to make sense of the chaos. "How is this happening?" demanded. "We gave them 3 months to comply with the decree. How can they cause so much damage in 3 days?" His chief strategist, an elderly named, stepped forward. He had served the council for over 200 years. In all that time, he had never seen anything like this. Chancellor, I have been reviewing our records. The situation is worse than we realized. He activated a holographic display. A map of the galaxy appeared, with red indicators spreading across it like drops of blood in water. Human shipping companies move approximately 60% of all interstellar cargo. This includes food, medicine, raw materials, and manufactured goods. When they stopped moving, supply chains across the galaxy began to collapse. Stared at the map. 60%. How did they gain control of so much shipping? They did not take control, Chancellor. They built it. Over the past 2 centuries, human merchants offered lower prices and faster delivery than anyone else. Species that once operated their own shipping fleets found it cheaper to hire humans instead. Gradually, they let their own capabilities decline. He zoomed in on a cluster of systems near the galactic core. It is not just shipping. Human engineers maintain approximately 70% of all colonial infrastructure outside. Power plants, water treatment facilities, communication networks, transportation systems. When they walked off their jobs, these systems began to fail. A new set of indicators appeared on the map, these ones in orange. Human financial institutions process 80% of all interstellar credit transfers. 3 days ago, they froze all accounts belonging to council member species. No one can pay for anything. Contracts cannot be fulfilled. Economies are grinding to a halt. Felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Fear, real fear. Then we seize their assets, he said. We take control of their ships and stations by force. Shook his head slowly. We cannot. Their computer systems are protected by encryption we cannot break. Our best technicians have tried. They estimate it would take 300 years to crack the codes using our current technology. Then we capture their people. We force them to give us access. Their key personnel have already evacuated to locations we cannot trace. The humans who remain are low-level workers who do not have the access codes we need. Slammed his fist against the console. There must be something we can do. At that moment, a new report appeared on the main screen. It came from a military outpost near the human colony world of New Boston. Chancellor, the commander's voice was shaking. We attempted to land troops on the human colony as ordered. Ours were destroyed before they reached the atmosphere. We lost 4,000 soldiers in the first wave. Destroyed by what? Demanded. We do not know. Our sensors detected energy weapons of a type we have never encountered. The beams came from the planet's surface, but we could not locate their source. It was as if the entire planet was a weapon. Pulled up another display. This one showed the known human military capabilities according to Council intelligence. According to our records, human weapons technology is approximately 2 centuries behind the galactic standard. Their warships are slow and poorly armed. Their ground forces use primitive projectile weapons. He paused. Chancellor, either our intelligence is completely wrong, or the humans have been hiding their true capabilities for a very long time. On the human colony of New Boston, Lisa Grant stood in the control center of a facility that officially did not exist. She was 45 years old, with short brown hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had spent her entire career preparing for exactly this moment. Around her, technicians monitored systems that would have seemed like science fiction to the rest of the galaxy. Weapons that could strike targets from halfway across a solar system. Shields that could stop anything short of a supernova. Communication networks that operated faster than the speed of light. The fleet is withdrawing, one of her technicians reported. They are moving to a safe distance. Lisa nodded. Good. Maintain defensive posture. Do not pursue. Ma'am, we could destroy their entire fleet with a single strike. Should we not press the advantage? Lisa shook her head. Our orders are to defend, not attack. The ambassador is handling the political side. Our job is to make sure they understand that attacking us is not an option." She looked up at the main display, which showed the retreating alien ships. "They thought they could push us around because we seemed weak. They are learning that appearance and reality are not the same thing, but we do not want to humiliate them. We want them to understand." Back on the council station, received another message. This one was from Ambassador Daniel. "Chancellor, I hope you have had time to reconsider your position. As you have seen, humanity is not as helpless as you believed. We do not wish to cause unnecessary suffering, but we will not accept subordination." Read the message 3 times. Each time his scales grew a little paler. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. Had no answer. For the first time in his long career, he had no answer at all. Admiral Grace Peters had spent her entire adult life preparing for a war she hoped would never come. She had joined the Earth Defense Force at 18, risen through the ranks by being smarter and tougher than everyone around her, and eventually earned command of humanity's most powerful secret weapon. The carrier Independence floated in the darkness between stars, surrounded by 200 warships that the galaxy did not know existed. These were not the slow, clumsy vessels that humans showed to their alien neighbors. These were something else entirely. Sleek, fast, and armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. Grace stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the tactical display. She was 52 years old, with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. Her uniform was simple and practical, decorated with medals that would have meant nothing to the aliens she was about to face. "Admiral," her tactical officer said, "fleet incoming. 300 vessels, including 12 capital ships. They will arrive in 15 minutes." Grace nodded calmly. "Signal all ships to maintain formation. Weapons remain powered down until I give the order." "Ma'am, they outnumber us significantly." "Numbers are not everything." Was young, only 28, but he had been chosen for this assignment because he was brilliant and steady under pressure. He had trained on simulators that prepared him for exactly this scenario, but simulators were not real life. "Yes, ma'am," he said, swallowing his nervousness. The minutes ticked by slowly. Grace used the time to review her orders one final time. She was authorized to defend human space with whatever force was necessary, but she was not authorized to start a war of extermination. The goal was to demonstrate human capabilities, not to destroy the entirely. It was a delicate balance. Show enough strength to make them afraid, but not so much that they felt they had nothing to lose. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a burst of distorted space. 300 warships arranged themselves in a standard combat formation, with the capital ships protected in the center and smaller vessels screening the flanks. Grace had to admit they looked impressive. They built their ships to intimidate, with sharp angles and glowing weapons ports. Each capital ship was over a mile long, bristling with enough firepower to devastate a small moon. Against a normal enemy, they would have been terrifying. "Open a communication channel," Grace ordered. The face of Fleet Commander appeared on the main screen. He was young for his rank, his scales bright green with youth and ambition. Grace had read his file. He was aggressive, overconfident, and convinced of his own superiority, perfect for what she needed. "Human vessels," said, his voice dripping with contempt, "you are in violation of galactic law. Your fleet is ordered to surrender immediately. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Grace waited a moment before responding. She wanted him to see that she was not afraid. "Commander," she said, "I am Admiral Grace Peters of the Earth Defense Force. I am going to give you one chance to turn your fleet around and go home. I suggest you take it." Laughed. It was an ugly sound full of arrogance. "You suggest? You are outnumbered 3-2. Your ships are smaller than ours. Your technology is primitive. What possible threat could you pose to the Imperial fleet?" Grace turned to power up the main cannon. Yes, ma'am. Across the fleet, systems that had been dormant for decades came to life. Reactors that had been running at minimal capacity suddenly surged to full power. Weapons that existed only in classified files began charging. On the flagship, alarms started screaming. "Commander," the science officer reported, his voice shaking, "the human ships are generating energy signatures we have never seen before. Each vessel is producing power equal to a small star. Our sensors cannot fully measure it." Stared at his display in disbelief. "That is impossible. Their technology is centuries behind ours." "Sir, I am reading weapons systems that do not match any known configuration. Their shields are activating at frequencies we cannot analyze. Everything we know about human capabilities appears to be wrong." Grace's voice came through the communication channel again. "Commander, for 200 years, humanity has shown the galaxy only what we wanted you to see. We acted weak because it suited our purposes. We let you believe you were superior because it made our lives easier. We smiled and fixed your machines and moved your cargo and pretended to be grateful for the opportunity." The main cannon of the Independence finished charging. It was a weapon that could punch through anything the galaxy had ever built. "We were never inferior, Commander. We were patient, and now our patience has run out." Tried to maintain his composure, but his scales had shifted to a sickly yellow color that indicated fear among his species. "You are bluffing. This is some kind of trick." "Let me show you that it is not." Grace nodded to. A single beam of pure energy lanced out from the Independence. It crossed the distance between the fleets in less than a second, too fast for any defensive system to react. It struck the largest capital ship dead center and passed through without slowing. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the great vessel split in half, its internal structure completely severed. Secondary explosions rippled through both halves as reactor containment failed. Within 30 seconds, a ship that had taken 10 years to build was reduced to expanding clouds of debris and frozen bodies. Silence filled both bridges. They stared at the remains of their flagship in shocked disbelief. The humans watched with grim satisfaction. "Commander," Grace said quietly, "you now have 10 seconds to order your fleet to withdraw. After that, I will stop being polite." She began counting. Did not need 10 seconds. His hands were shaking as he gave the order. "All ships retreat. Maximum speed, get us out of here." The fleet turned and ran. It was not an orderly withdrawal. It was a panicked flight, ships bumping into each other in their desperate haste to escape. Grace watched them go. She felt no joy in the victory. War was not something to celebrate even when you won, but she felt satisfaction. Humanity had sent a message that could not be ignored. Admiral said softly, "What happens now?" Grace sighed. "Now we wait. We have shown them we can hurt them. The question is whether they are smart enough to learn from it." She turned away from the display. "Signal the ambassador. Tell him the demonstration was successful. The ball is in his court now." Far away, on the council station, High Chancellor received a report that would change everything. An entire capital ship, destroyed in seconds by a weapon that should not exist. His mighty fleet, running like frightened animals from enemies they had dismissed as primitives. For the first time in his long life, began to understand that everything he believed about humans was wrong. And that terrified him more than anything else. High Chancellor had not slept in 6 days. Dark circles had formed under his eyes, and his scales had faded to a dull gray that made him look 20 years older. He sat alone in his private chambers, surrounded by reports that painted a picture of complete disaster. The collective had withdrawn from the Galactic Council. Their delegate had delivered a bitter speech blaming them for dragging them into a conflict they could not win. 3 of their colony worlds were on the edge of famine because human supply ships had not delivered food in over a week. Their people were rioting in the streets, demanding that their leaders make peace with humanity at any cost. The collective had gone further. They had opened secret negotiations with Earth's government, begging for human engineers to return and repair their failing infrastructure. Their great cities, built over thousands of years, were falling apart because no one knew how to maintain the systems that humans had installed. Power grids failed. Water treatment plants stopped working. Communication networks went dark. The Imperium had learned its lesson the hardest way possible. Their ground invasion of New Boston had resulted in catastrophe. 40,000 of their finest soldiers had died in a single day, killed by weapons and tactics they had never imagined. The survivors spoke of invisible enemies, of attacks that came from everywhere at once, of human soldiers who seemed to know exactly where they were at all times. And now, 6 days after the decree that was supposed to establish human subordination was preparing to admit defeat. The council chamber was almost empty when Daniel returned. Only 4 species had sent representatives. The others had either withdrawn entirely or were too busy dealing with internal crises to participate. Daniel walked to the human platform, but this time he was not alone. Admiral Grace Peters stood at his right side, her uniform crisp and her medals gleaming. At his left stood a young woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as Secretary of Commerce Cole. Looked down at them from his elevated throne. He felt none of the superiority he had felt at their last meeting. Now he felt only exhaustion and fear. "Ambassador," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you have made your point. What are your demands?" Daniel looked up at the Chancellor with an expression that was almost sympathetic. Almost. "The terms are straightforward," he said. "First, full recognition of human sovereignty over all our current territories. Second, reparations for the insult of your decree to be negotiated with Secretary Cole. Third, most favored trading status for human merchants throughout council space. Fourth, a permanent human seat on this council with full voting rights." Was not present, but her replacement, a younger named, rose to speak. His mandibles clicked nervously. "These demands are outrageous. You ask us to treat you as equals when you have been part of galactic civilization for only 3 centuries. Our species have ruled these stars for 10,000 years." Cole stepped forward. She was small in stature, barely 5 feet tall, but there was nothing small about her presence. She carried a tablet that contained information that could destroy economies with a single press. "Delegate," she said pleasantly, "let me share some numbers with you. In the past week, your species has lost access to 73% of your pharmaceutical supply chain, 81% of your computer manufacturing capability, 94% of your financial services infrastructure." She scrolled through her tablet. "Your economy will collapse completely within 6 months if current conditions continue. Your people will begin dying of preventable diseases within 3 months. Your colonies will start experiencing food shortages within 6 weeks." She looked up with a smile that contained no warmth. "Do you really want to argue about what is outrageous?" Sat down without another word. Raised his hand weakly. "I do not understand. How did this happen? We had intelligence reports. We had analysts studying your species for decades. How did we miss all of this?" Daniel walked forward until he stood directly beneath the Chancellor's platform. He looked up at the Ancient with something that might have been pity. "You missed it because you never really looked," he said. "You saw what you expected to see. Primitive humans fixing your machines. Simple humans moving your cargo. Grateful humans accepting whatever scraps you threw their way." He spread his hands. "You never asked why we were everywhere. You never wondered why we worked so hard to make ourselves useful. You never considered that we might have a plan that stretched across centuries." Grace Peters spoke for the first time. Her voice was cold and professional. 300 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the galaxy, we realized immediately that we were outmatched. Your technology was superior. Your populations were larger. Your fleets could have crushed us without effort. She stepped forward to stand beside Daniel. So we did what humans have always done when facing a stronger enemy. We adapted. We made ourselves valuable. We studied your weaknesses, and we waited. Cole nodded. We built shipping companies that offered lower prices and better service. We trained engineers who were more skilled and more reliable. We created financial institutions that were more efficient and more trustworthy. Gradually, you came to depend on us for everything. Daniel picked up the thread. And while you were busy feeling superior, we were building weapons you could not imagine. We were developing technologies that make your most advanced systems look like toys. We were preparing for the day when someone would make the mistake you made. Stared down at them. His scales rippled with an emotion that humans would recognize as shame. Why, he asked, why pretend to be weak when you were strong? Why serve us when you could have conquered us? Daniel was quiet for a moment before answering. Because conquest is not victory, Chancellor. If we had revealed our true power 3 centuries ago, you would have united against us. We would have won the war, but we would have lost the peace. We would have ruled a galaxy that hated and feared us. He gestured around the chamber. Instead, we made ourselves essential. We wove ourselves into the fabric of your civilization so deeply that you cannot remove us without destroying yourselves. And when you tried to make us slaves, you discovered that the slave had become the master. Grace Peters added, we do not want to destroy you. We do not want to rule you. We want to be recognized as what we have always been, equals, partners, a species worthy of respect. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with defeat. We accept your terms. The words hung in the air. 300 years of careful planning had led to this moment. Humanity had achieved in 6 days what conquest could never have accomplished. They had won without fighting a war. They had gained power without shedding rivers of blood. Daniel nodded slowly. Thank you, Chancellor. I think this is the beginning of a new relationship between our species, one based on mutual respect rather than dominance. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. In the future, when you encounter a new species, perhaps you should take the time to truly understand them before making assumptions. Appearances can be deceiving. He walked out of the chamber with Grace and at his sides. Behind them, the remnants of the Galactic Council sat in stunned silence, trying to understand how everything they believed had been so completely wrong. 1 year had passed since the day that historians would call the Great Humbling. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted, and the changes were still happening. The council chamber looked different now. Human architects had been invited to redesign the space, and they had created something beautiful. Warm wooden panels lined the lower walls, blending with the alien crystal above. Soft lighting replaced the harsh glare of before. Comfortable seating had been installed for all delegates, not just the senior species. Most importantly, the platforms were now all at the same level. No species sat above any other. Daniel occupied the human seat, a position that had become one of the most important in galactic politics. Around him sat representatives from 15 species, including 3 new members who had applied to join after seeing how the council had evolved. Cole was presenting a proposal for restructuring interstellar trade. Her ideas were complex, built on economic models that alien analysts struggled to understand. But they had learned to trust her judgment. Every prediction she had made over the past year had proven correct. The human proposal is approved, announced when she finished. His voice was quieter than it used to be, less arrogant. The past year had taught him humility. Are there any objections? No one spoke. The session continued for another 2 hours, addressing issues that ranged from border disputes to environmental regulations. Through it all, Daniel noticed how different the atmosphere had become. Species that had once barely tolerated each other were now working together. Old enemies were finding common ground. Humanity had not just won a place at the table, they had changed the table itself. After the session ended, Daniel gathered his materials and prepared to leave. He was tired. The work of reshaping galactic politics was exhausting, and there was always more to do. Ambassador. He turned to find standing behind him. The old chancellor looked smaller somehow, diminished by the events of the past year, but there was something new in his eyes, something that looked almost like respect. Chancellor, how can I help you? Gestured toward a side corridor. Would you walk with me? There is something I wish to discuss privately. Daniel nodded and followed through the station's corridors. They eventually reached an observation deck overlooking the station's artificial gardens. Plants from 100 worlds grew together in carefully designed harmony. I have been studying human history, said, staring out at the gardens. Your species fascinates me. You are so young compared to us, yet you have accomplished so much. We had good teachers, Daniel replied. Every species we encountered taught us something valuable. That is generous of you to say. We taught you to hide, to deceive, to wait in the shadows until the moment was right to strike. Daniel shook his head. You taught us patience. You taught us that strength without wisdom is useless. Those are valuable lessons. Turn to face him. I have noticed a pattern in your history. Your species has been conquered many times. You were ruled by empires that seemed invincible. You were enslaved, oppressed, treated as lesser beings. That is true. Yet somehow you always survived, more than survived. You absorbed your conquerors, you learned from them. You grew stronger while they grew weaker. Eventually, you outlasted them all. Daniel said nothing, he simply waited. I do not understand how, continued. They ruled this region of space for 10,000 years because we destroyed anyone who threatened us. That was our strategy. Crush opposition before it can grow. But you humans, you were crushed again and again, and somehow you always came back stronger. Daniel thought about the question for a long moment before answering. Chancellor, humans learned long ago that the greatest victories are won without fighting. Any fool can start a war. It takes wisdom to win a peace. He looked out at the gardens, where alien species walked together in harmony. When we first met your civilization, we could have tried to fight. We would have lost, but we could have tried. Instead, we asked ourselves a different question. Not how do we defeat them, but how do we make them need us? And so you made yourselves indispensable. Yes, we wove ourselves into the fabric of galactic civilization so completely that removing us would tear everything apart. We became the merchants who moved your goods, the engineers who maintained your infrastructure, the bankers who managed your wealth. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already too late. Scales shifted to a color Daniel had never seen before. It took him a moment to realize it was the expression of deep respect. You played a longer game than any of us imagined possible. Daniel smiled. We always do. Humans think in generations. We plant seeds knowing that our will harvest the fruit. We make sacrifices today so that our descendants can thrive tomorrow. Is that why you did not destroy us when you had the chance? Admiral Peters could have eliminated our entire fleet in minutes. You could have conquered our worlds while we were helpless. We could have, but what would that have accomplished? We would have ruled a galaxy that hated us. We would have spent centuries fighting rebellions and suppressing resistance. That is not the future we wanted. Daniel turned to face the Chancellor directly. We wanted what we have now, a seat at the table, a voice in how the galaxy is governed, the respect we earned by being valuable, not the fear we could have earned by being violent. Was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. I owe you an apology, Ambassador. When I made that decree, I thought I was protecting my people from a growing threat. I thought I was being prudent. Instead, I was being foolish. I judged your species by appearances and nearly brought disaster upon us all." Daniel extended his hand, a human gesture of friendship, looked at it for a moment, then reached out with his own four-fingered hand to clasp it. "The past is past, Chancellor. What matters now is the future we build together." They stood there for a moment, two representatives of species that had nearly gone to war, finding common ground in the gardens of a station that belonged to everyone. Later that evening, Daniel returned to his quarters and found a message waiting from Earth. It was from his daughter, now 30 years old and serving as a junior diplomat on one of the new human embassies. "Dad," her message read, "I wanted you to know that I am proud of you. What you accomplished this year will echo through history. I will learn about the great humbling and how humanity earned its place among the stars without firing a shot." Daniel read the message twice, then saved it to his personal archive. His daughter was wrong about one thing. They had fired shots. Grace Peters had destroyed a capital ship to prove a point. 40,000 soldiers had died on New Boston. But compared to what could have happened, the cost had been remarkably low. A galaxy of 400 billion souls had been transformed without a true war. That was something worth celebrating. He looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were moving cargo, human engineers were building infrastructure, human teachers were sharing knowledge. The galaxy still depended on humanity, and now everyone knew it. The decree had declared humans subordinate. 1 year later, humans sat as equals among the great powers of the galaxy. Some might call it a miracle. Daniel called it planning. Humanity had waited 300 years for this moment. They had endured condescension and dismissal, prejudice and contempt. They had smiled through insults and worked through exploitation. And when the moment finally came, they had been ready. They would always be ready. That was simply what humans did. Daniel closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest. Tomorrow there would be more work to do. There was always more work to do. But for now, in this quiet moment, he could be satisfied. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and they were only getting started.